Welcome to this fifth seminar of the series Nothing is Ever Lost, series of seminars we organized in FBK, Fondazione Bruno Kessler, Center for Religious Studies, in collaboration with other institutions to in memory of our friend and colleague, the Italian sociologist Massimo Rosati. I really want to thank once more my co-organizers, Paolo Costa and Alessandra Vitullo, Professor Alessandra Vitullo at the Sapienza University, Laboratory on Religions and Social Change. I also would like to thank once more our director in FBK, Center for Religious Studies, Massimo Leone, and the other three universities in Rome, which are collaborating with us in these initiatives that are University of Rome Tor Vergata, our colleague Pietro Vereni, the University Roma 3, Department for Human Studies, Professor Maria Chiara Giorda, and Lewis University with Professor Christina Stöckel. We are joined by having experienced a long friendship, first of all, and meaningful experiences of shared work and study with Massimo Rosati, and this is the spirit of this series, is to reflect once more and to draw up the legacy of his studies, which are particularly able to inspire us, not only social sciences, but also other disciplines in the common effort of interpreting complex social phenomena, and in particular the role and space of religions and of the sacred in contemporary society. Today, I'm particularly glad to host a meeting, a seminar, which is dedicated to the father of French sociology, Émile Durkheim, which was, of course, the focus, the central background and core stimuli for the reflection and the work of Massimo Rosati. So I will just immediately leave the floor to our guests, which are a perfect couple to this event, because they both shared this experience of working with Massimo on the related topics, and most of all, they shared a meaningful friendship with him. Matteo Bortolini is professor of sociology at the University of Pdua. His work is mainly focused on the sociology of ideas and of intellectuals profiles. His last book, A Joyful Serious Man, regarding Bella, has been an important contribution to sociological reflection over the last year. We had the opportunity to listen to Professor Bortolini's presentation of the forthcoming book several months ago here in this center. And today he is presenting a reflection, a particular exercise concerning the profile and the role of Émile Durkheim in social sciences. With I don't know if we must shift probably the laptop just to allow him to present. Okay. Sorry, just a second, so that I can share with you. Okay, I hope it's working. So beyond individual asceticism, collective ritual as exercise in Durkheim, I immediately leave the floor to Matteo Bortolini.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here for the 100th time at FB Cup. I'm so glad to be here, and so glad to participate in this series of seminars. I don't want to talk about Massimo now. Maybe I will talk when I get to the end of this very experimental talk. And I think the best way to start is to tell you about how I had the idea for this seminar. But in fact, I had the idea of I would say what is going to become a small book, probably, and I underline probably. So there is a book series by the Italian publishing house ETS, Pisa, that is called Filosofia dell'esercizio, Philosophies of Exercise. And so far, 6 volumes have been published in this book series. And they are, in a sense, reflections on individual authors, but in fact, more generally, reflections of a tradition of methods of exercise and asceticism. In a sense, they all start from the same understanding of maybe of human life, of an idea of human beings as pointing, focusing, trying to reach some higher goal, some goal that is higher than themselves, and being hindered and finding obstacles in reaching these higher goals by a number of very deeply ingrained features of themselves, which we may call affections or passions or desires. And so the main point of this book series is to analyze a number of authors who have tried to find a method of practices and exercises, both mental or physical or both, that would help individual human beings to overcome their limits, to overcome their passions, desires, and everything that comes as an obstacle against reaching these higher goals. So obviously, the authors that have been analyzed are very different. Some come from antiquity, some come from other cultures, some come from modernity, like as in Matteo Santarelli's book on Freud. Obviously, the books are very different because these authors are very different, and their take on what is the higher goal, what are the passions, and what kind of exercises and methods and practical techniques are needed to overcome passions are different. But one very interesting thing of this book series is that every book has the same and has to have the same structure. 4 chapters, and every book has the same 4 chapters with the same titles. The first chapter is about passions and affections and their diagnosis. The second is about the fact that these passions and desires and affections can be cured, which is the main presuppositions of all the authors that are treated in these books. And then the third chapter is about exercise and therapy and how we can overcome these limits and passions. So I was reading this great book by Roberto Alciati about Evagrio, who's one prototypical monk, and so yes, Alciati is on the right and Evagrio is on the left if you have doubts. But and I was reading this book, and while I was reading this book, it came to my mind that we could do exactly the same reading and interpretation for Durkheim. What I was doing was I was reading about Evagrius, about whom I did not know anything about before reading Roberto's book, but and I was like, my head was twirling, and I was saying, "Oh, we could say the same for Durkheim. We could say the same for Durkheim." And then I said, "Okay, I'm going to try to write the same book, but on Durkheim." So the idea beyond this seminar is that we can read Durkheim as if he was the founder of an ascetic school, right? A particular school of anthropotechnics, which is very different from Evagrius and Socrates and some other authors in the series, but nonetheless has some very interesting parallels with them. But in order to do that, in order to understand this, we have to take very seriously one interpretation of asceticism given by a very famous German scholar, Peter Sloterdijk, who's like obviously an author that is very dear and has been very much read by all people writing and thinking about asceticism in the last 20 years. And in his book, You Must Change Your Life, Peter Sloterdijk gives this understanding and this interpretation of modernity as the time where it's not a time where religion fades away or we have a kind of old-time secularism or secularization, but a time where the strong distinction between a small number of religious virtuosi who strive for verticality to reach God and distinguish themselves from the mass of the people changes a lot. And in a sense, asceticism gets democratized and becomes more and more inclusive. Think of Luther's dictum that every man should be a monk and this and that. But in the meantime, what happens is that not only that the number of people striving for asceticism and practicing asceticism grows and grows and grows, but obviously their goal cannot be that vertical, that their exercise cannot be that strong and assuming and heavy and I would say in a sense totalitarian as it was for the religious virtuosi of old. It becomes more democratized, more inclusive, but also much more horizontal. So while I was thinking about the connection between Evagrius and Durkheim, I thought, yes, Durkheim can be read exactly like this, as somebody giving a manual of instructions to create a new asceticism typical for a modern society and a democratic society. Obviously enough, this should be very clear from the outset. I'm not trying to do any historical or philological work on Durkheim. I take Durkheim between two lines as a construction, as a theoretical fiction, as not as Émile Durkheim as an author, but
just to say that slides are not in our screen.
Okay.
Oh.
They cannot see it.
Thank you, Raquel.
So Roberto didn't see his great picture. Oh my God. No.
Forse l'attivi del
No,
PowerPoint di solito è di lato a reader, di fianco a reader sotto. Vedi che c'è reader, aspetta, sotto nella barra ultima, sì, c'è per caricare il PowerPoint. Qua scendi dritta.
Sì, ma stiamo lavorando su un PDF che non so esattamente dove sia.
Ma lì c'è un PowerPoint.
No, ma non è su PowerPoint.
No.
Ah, ok.
Sorry. Try to solve.
Prendi la finestra
Sì,
del
Durkheim
browser.
esercizio.
Una finestra,
Ah.
su deve selezionare la finestra,
Yeah. Is it okay now?
No.
No? You don't see
Not
still?
yet.
Just see.
Just see a pretty face, Leia. We just see the picture of yours, but no screen visible.
Oh God. I'm so sorry.
It is 2020 again. Blocca finestra browser e poi metti nel browser quella finestra lì. Quella, esatto, vai. E poi metti la tab di Durkheim là, che è quella quella lì. Can you now see it? La vedete?
Can you see it now?
No, solito problema.
No, noi vediamo lo schermo con scritto Valeria sta presentando la fotografia di Valeria.
Go.
Thank you. Intanto siamo intraprendendo.
Se noi interrompessimo il gruppo, se mettessimo il gruppo a riposo, no, perché non è forse più semplice.
Possiamo anche togliere il gruppo, però il mio computer non è autorizzato.
Va adesso?
No.
No.
Adesso
They should be able to see them.
Esatto. Questo è veramente strano perché...
There we go. Great.
Adesso sì.
Adesso sì, però io adesso non so più come cambiarle, per cui...
Ma tu puoi andare sul sito, puoi scegliere.
Vabbè, io provo ad andare avanti, ok?
Penso che tu possa poi andare sul DNS.
E se ti porto questo?
E come faccio a cambiarli adesso? Da qua?
Sì. Do you still see the slide?
La vedete ancora?
Sì.
Yes, we do.
The slide with warning. Okay.
Okay, so I was saying what I'm going to say now is not an attempt to do any historical philological work on Durkheim. We know his works are different, concepts change, it's not always coherent, the reflection changes with time and blah, blah, blah. So what I'm in fact trying to do is to find an inner logic in his work, and thus creating a kind of theoretical fiction based on some basic concepts and try to show how these concepts go together if observed from the point of view of a philosophy of exercise. Okay, so it's in a sense a reading that will make some violence to Durkheim maybe, but I think it's worth it because it tells us something very interesting. So to go on, chapter 1 about affections and their diagnosis. So we all know that Durkheim starts from a reinterpretation of Western philosophy, and especially a concept that he calls and summarizes very long dialogue between philosophers in the Western tradition, and maybe not only in the Western tradition, which he calls the homo duplex. The homo duplex, as we know, is the idea, conception of human beings, and I want to underline empirical individuals as human beings, as made of two different parts. One part is called as personal or individual. And here, as I was saying, we have to do some violence to Durkheim because we have different wordings, different ways to depict the two parts of the homo duplex in different works. So we have to simplify a bit or summarize a bit. So we have an individual side, which is rooted in the body, in individual bodies, and started from sensory experiences and feelings, needs, appetites, passions, and what is sometimes called instincts, while this is a very problematic word, and that classical philosophy summarized in the word body. The second side, the second part of the homo duplex is called impersonal. And this encompasses a number of different phenomena, starting from language, concepts, rationality, morality, depending on different authors and different philosophers at different times in the development of Western philosophy. And this has been summarized or symbolized with the word soul. Obviously enough, if we want to start from affections, and I will repeat, I'm dividing this presentation according to the chapters of the book series. So I'm trying to do an exercise in applying the scheme to the material. Where do we observe passions and affections? In the individual, personal side of homo duplex. And it is very interesting to notice that Durkheim makes two very interesting examples of where can we observe directly this personal side. Obviously enough, if we observe human adults, the two sides are always already intermingled, connected, developed in some sense, right? But there are two cases in which we can have an almost pure natural observation of the personal side. So the first example, obviously enough, is the unsocialized kid. Children, and especially very small children, babies, they show the personal part at its most natural state, so to say. And Durkheim's description of babies and children is very interesting. These are kids who change continuously the object of their attention, whose feelings change continuously. They are wandering all the time. This is the expression that he uses in the moral education, which is, I would say, for this kind of work, probably is most important work. This is very interesting. He describes children as this kind of beings whose attention, feelings, and interest are continuously changing. They cannot really stay focused on something. They cannot really appreciate something they have. They have to immediately leave something they have to look for something else. And this reminds me a lot of chapter 9 of Hobbes' Leviathan, where you find the same description of human beings in a state of nature. Their desire changes its object all the time. Their mind, their bodies, their passions are wandering around all the time. The second example is a bit trickier, and I would say more interesting. And we have this example in moral education also. And he says, at some point, Durkheim is discussing body punishment in schools. And he says, why do teachers beat their students, their pupils? And he says, this always happens when you have two groups and there is a strong cultural difference between the two groups. And when one of the groups that come into contact think of themselves as superior to the others, in a sense, their limits, the rules, the norms, the barriers, the boundaries that keep their violence at bay just fall down. and they use violence on others. And so it makes this parallel, which is very interesting, between teachers and colonists, as people who are so superior to the others that they encounter that all the boundaries fall down. And he says something like, you can really see the personal, passional, unbounded passions in these situations. So, but why is this interesting for us? Because this personal, individual side, when it doesn't have any intrinsic limit, it doesn't have any internal limit. By itself, if left by itself, it would exercise its energy, in a sense, in all directions. It would be like instincts, passions, needs, and desires going all around, always around, and not finding an object, a form, a limit, a boundary. And Durkheim uses this very famous expression, the passion for the infinite, to describe this situation where human beings are not bounded by limits. So what is the limit? Where does the limit come from? And this is the second point, and the second interesting point that we find in Durkheim, and is his conception of the homo duplex. So you see, this is a very classical depiction of the two parts of a human being, right? And since Plato, Durkheim says, the two parts of a human being are not only two, but they are first in a hierarchy, and they are considered as opposed one to each other. So there is a war between the two parts of the individual, and there's a clear hierarchy. The impersonal part is more important, is better, is higher than the personal part. Soul is more important, is better than the body. Rationality is more important than experiences and the senses and everything else. So it is very, Durkheim says, all these philosophers for almost 2,000 years have talked about these two parts of any individual human being. They've talked about these two parts in different ways, but nonetheless, they've always talked about two parts in opposition and hierarchically understood. So they cannot be wrong. They cannot be wrong about the fact there are really empirically two parts. One is better than the other, but their depictions and their solutions have been wrong all the time. And now, Durkheim, I'm telling you what is the right solution. It's like he was saying something like, we are observing something, the fact is there, but the interpretations are wrong. Now I'm giving you the real good, ultimate interpretation. And obviously, the interesting thing is he separates the two parts and says the individual personal part is intrinsic to the body of the individual, while the second impersonal part was not only higher, but also made outside of the individual. It's something that is added to the human individual. And here, the interesting thing, something that I've been struggling for maybe 25 years, is how fascinating it is to read Durkheim and see how he really wrestles with language, because he knows he got something, he understood something, but his language is not right. His language cannot express what he got. So if you read the text, it's something like, we have inside us something that is not us, but it is at the same time the better part of us. And every time that he says us, that means something different, but also the same things, right? And this better part that we have inside ourselves has been theorized or called the source, a piece of God, mana, or this and that, but in fact, it is society. So, what Durkheim is saying is they were all right in their description, all wrong in their interpretation. We don't have to find any transcendental or supernatural solution to this problem. We have a very concrete, it also uses this word observable, because somehow he thinks that society can be observed. That is not very convincing to me, but anyway. And he says that impersonal part is society. So inside every empirical individual, we have two parts. So one is rooted in the body, in the senses, and in the, I would say, biological life in a sense, not only biological life, but rooted in biological life. And then we have another part, which comes from society. So obviously enough, I don't have the time to go into the details of this, but what is interesting is that this societal or social part of the homo duplex is made mainly of two different elements or processes. The first one is discipline. Discipline is a way of containing passions, instincts, energy. It's like a wall built around the individual. It's like a kind of a cage, or let's say my favorite metaphor is a kind of a bottle. If you have something liquid like a wine or beer or water, and you don't have a bottle, you just have a splash of something. And that splash of something will lose itself in the environment. And then if you have a bottle or a glass, you contain this thing, right? And give it a form. The second point is what he calls the attachment groups. So discipline is a way of containing what is limitless and boundless by itself, which is the personal part of the homo duplex. While attachment to groups, and Durkheim speaks about family, country, humanity, maybe professional groups, attachment to groups gives people some higher goal to pursue, right? So it's like you have this very energetic being without limits, without boundaries. So disciplines as norms of conduct close this energy, and then attachment to groups gives a direction to the energy, right? So one is closure, the other one is purpose. So the society, the tricky part is that society is at the same time the ultimate goal, a goal that is worth pursuing for Durkheim, because individual goals or the goals or of a number of individuals are not worth pursuing, in fact, but is at the same time the ultimate goal and the means that is needed to pursue that goal. So one side is the attachment to groups, the other side is discipline. This is very clear when we read suicide, and the two main kinds of suicide can be understood as emerging from situations where discipline or attachment to groups are weak, right? So when attachment is weak, individuals only have their individual goals, and they are too weak to in a sense, sustain, give sense, give meaning to their lives, and so they kill themselves. And when discipline and norms are weak, then we have the kind of anomic suicide, which means that passions are not kept at bay, are not limited, and so energy goes all over the place, and people kill themselves. So what is therapy? So we need homo duplex to resolve the first two questions, right? Affections is the personal part of the homo duplex. Curability is the other impersonal part of the homo duplex, which is society. And society works through discipline and attachment to groups. But what about therapy? Because the interesting thing about traditions of asceticism is not only the analysis, is the practical. If we go and read Alciati's book on Evagrius or the other books in the series, we always end up with some very practical instructions. How we do that, how we keep passions at bay, how we can transcend these obstacles that hinder us from getting to the higher goal. And then we don't need philosophy there. We need very practical advice, a handbook, a manual for doing these things. So in Durkheim, we find mainly three different ways in which society acts on the individual in order to give him or her discipline and attachment. I will skip the first two. The first one is education, which is the action by adults on kids and the new generations aimed at socializing them to basic social norms and shared social norms. The second one is sanctions and rebound that a norm gets on the individual in the moment that it's violated, and that works in a very peculiar way in Durkheim's theory, but we don't have the time to go into this. But the third way, collective rituals, is, I think, the most interesting, right? And this is where my interpretation wants to go, in a sense, right? So the idea is that collective rituals are a form of collective asceticism that is in tune with the modern society. A modern society where the central protagonist, the central figure of asceticism, is no longer the individual virtuoso, different from others and aiming at the vertical dimension, but is the mass of the people. And in a sense, it is the better part of ourselves, that is society, working on itself through collective rituals. So and this is where obviously the parallel is more shaky, right? Because if we read the classics of asceticism, we have very specific rules, very particular rules that individuals should apply, maybe with the help of a teacher, of a director, or whatever. While I think that in Durkheim, we can well understand collective rituals as this kind of mild asceticism for a democratic society. In order to do this, we have to go back to Alciati and the subtitle of his book. This is a handbook, a Christian handbook to see God. And I think this was very inspiring for my reflection, because seeing God is the goal of Evagrius' work. But I think it is also the goal of Durkheim's work, in a very different way, but a very similar way, nonetheless. In Durkheim, we have three things that have to be seen, right? And I don't want to be too much of a Eric Voegelin fan, but looks like a real kind of modern gnosis in a sense. So the first thing that we have to see is this, that God is in fact society. This is the infamous Durkheim's thesis of the elementary forms of religious life, something that contemporary sociology can do without, but I think it's crucial to understand what we're talking about. you see, the idea that collective social rituals can be a form of democratic mass asceticism is reinforced by the fact that we do not strive for God, because God is society itself. So it's society working on itself through these collective rituals, first. Second, another thing that we should see, and when I say we should see, is the fact, I'm underlining the fact that one very important point of Durkheim's sociology is that sociology is not only science for science sake, in a sense, right? It's a very politically and morally oriented kind of knowledge meant to solve a number of problems of 19th century, the end of 19th century France, right? So through this is work on morality, on social integration, societal integration, division of labor, this and that, and blah, 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 and suicide, and everything that he did. Durkheim was, in fact, trying to show his fellow citizens a truth, a scientific truth, that was crucial for remaking that society. And this is why I'm saying it's kind of modern gnosis, because it's enlightening the population, and especially politicians, but not only politicians, but enlightening the population through science to see things as they really are. And when we say that God is in fact a transfiguration of society, we are saying one of these truths. The second point is that society is the best part of us. And we have repeatedly, we find in Durkheim's work, phrases like, propositions like, when I submit to society, I'm finding my real freedom, because since society is inside me, and it is the best part of me, when I submit to societal norms and rules and discipline and attachment to groups, I'm in fact realizing the best of my humanity, the only thing that can make me flourish as an individual, as a group, as a country. The third thing is, which is the most interesting, I think, is that even if society is God or God is society, and even if society is the best part of ourselves, society is not given once and for all. One of the most interesting things about Durkheim is the idea that socialization for children is not enough to plant society inside them. So here, the argument is very complicated, but can be simplified in this sense. Individuals internalized societal symbols and ways of thinking, doing, and feeling, which is Durkheim's definition of society, through collective rituals where collective effervescence is born. So society is internalized through collective moments of energetic charge, right? But with time, this societal part, the impersonal part of the homo duplex fades away, becomes weaker and weaker, and the individual part becomes stronger. And so repeated rituals are needed in order to revive, to refresh the societal part, to refresh the better part of the homo duplex. And this is why collective rituals are needed repeatedly to reaffirm the societal part, which is in another vocabulary, Durkheimian vocabulary, the sacred part over the individual part and the profane part. So this is why I think it is legitimate, maybe controversial, but legitimate to put together the classical idea of exercise of asceticism and this idea of collective ritual in Durkheim, because it is a kind of not individual but collective exercise that is repeated again and again in order to keep the passions at bay and realize the higher goal that is at the same time the means society in its dual aspect of discipline and attachment to groups. We have this, I'm almost done. This is the basic mechanism that happens in a collective ritual. So it is very different from, obviously, the exercises and the various practices that Evagrius could do alone in his room, obviously. But the whole context, the whole environment, both symbolically and structurally, is different. So I think that we can read in a parallel Evagrius and Durkheim in this sense. This would be my my final idea, and Professor Alciati is looking very badly at me in this slide. But in the first column, you see the main points of his book on Evagrius, and in the second column, the analogies with Durkheim. And I think it mostly works. I don't know why half of the table is in Italian, but okay. Perché l'ho fatto detto qua, per cui non è finita la cosa. Ok. So, but dovevo andare a Bolzano. So you see, some of the points of the parallel are very close, some are more distant. But I think that not in 45 minutes, but in a small book of 120 pages, it could be argued that this is at least an acceptable or a debatable interpretation of Durkheim from the point of view of philosophy of asceticism. My presentation is finished. The last thing I wanted to show you is a great photograph of Massimo in a laundromat in New Haven some 20 years ago. And we were washing our clothes, obviously. And there were all kinds of people that you find in a typical American laundromat. And he was desperate because he was thinking about Durkheim, and I was saying something like, "Can we talk about something light, please? Something funny, please?" And he said, "Oh no, I cannot resolve this problem of the sacred and the modern society and this sacred." And it was like that every time. So I think this was a good way to remember Massimo if we needed that, in fact. Because a serious life, which is Durkheim's typical expression when he wanted to tell us why what we do is important, it was something that was important for him. I hope it has been important for me in the last 10 years. And yep, this is it.
Thank you.
Ne fallo?
Sì, sì, stiamo facendo così. Okay. Thank you so much, Matteo, for this attempt and to revisit and rethink together the legacy of Durkheim in a very it is food for our thought. And we when we decided to include this exercise in this series of seminar in memory of Massimo Rosati, we thought that it would have been wonderful to have Professor Raquel Weiss as a discussant because she's a scholar of Durkheim. She knew very well Massimo Rosati, and so she was. They were the perfect couple for us. Professor Weiss is a professor at the sociology department at the graduate program in sociology at the University of São Paulo do Sol, and she is also coordinator of the Brazilian Center for Durkheimian Studies and an associate researcher at the British Center for Durkheimian Studies at the University of Oxford. Her main areas of work are sociological theory, sociology of morality, and more recently, she has been developing research on gender and sexuality and on the relations between sociology and psychoanalysis. So I'm very glad to have the opportunity to host Professor Weiss in this conversation, and I immediately leave the floor for her comment. We agreed for 30 minutes, and then we can open the discussion to all of you, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. I also want to thank Alessandra Vitullo and all the organizers of this series of seminars. And I want to say it's a pleasure for me to be together with Matteo Bortolini for the first time, even if unfortunately I'm not with you in Trento. Maybe one day I can finally visit the foundation. But anyways, it's for me a very important occasion being here today in this event that, above anything else, is an event in the memory of Massimo Rosati. So I will begin by saying just a few words about him, as this is for me the way I have to begin to talk, and also my point of departure for my comments on this very interesting talk made by Matteo. Well, I met Massimo in person in 2012 by the occasion of a seminary we were organizing here in Porto Alegre, where I live in Brazil, on the 100 years of the elementary forms of religious life. And then we discovered that we had in common, beyond this common interest on Durkheimian theory as a whole, we had in common the friends, the colleagues from the British Center for Durkheimian Studies. And I want to bring here today the memory of Bill Pickering, who we used to call our intellectual father. And I mentioned Bill Pickering because maybe it was our last conversation. We were talking about Bill Pickering's birthday. And we were promising to remember each other the day of Bill Pickering's birthday, that we always used to send him a message, first as a sort of individual ritual. And after we met, we decided to do that together in a way. So Bill Pickering's birthday was in the 29th of January. So it was just one day before the day Massimo left us. So somehow this memory of Bill Pickering has a lot of meanings, diverse meanings, because maybe 2 months later, I guess 2 or 3 months later, I went to Cambridge to meet Bill Pickering, so we could write together Massimo's obituary. And I remember that Bill Pickering was very emotional about the whole thing. And he told that he considered Massimo the most brilliant Durkheimian scholar of his generation, and that he took him as a son. And a few years later, 2 years later, Bill Pickering also left us. He was 90, I'm not sure if 95 or 94 years old. And so this is also for me a way to pay honors to Bill Pickering together with Massimo Rosati, that in the whole Durkheimian scholarship were the most brilliant and dedicated scholars talking about religion in Durkheim, at least in my view. And they both had a very different way to talk about the sacred and the ritual, but in a sort of a complementary way. In Bill Pickering, we can find a very seriously committed and rigorous reading, that straight Durkheimiology. Bill used to dig every single line of Durkheimian texts to compare concepts, ideas, and that allows us to find connections that we could not see before the work he did. I'm referring to Pickering. And in Massimo's writings, that same commitment was there. He was also very rigorous in his readings, but a very different aspect is that we cannot say about Massimo that he was just a Durkheimian scholar, because he had the courage to dig from many other sources, and that made him a very creative intellectual. So he was not just doing Durkheimiology, but departing from Durkheim and putting other sources together. He managed to interpret contemporary society in a very peculiar way, making Durkheim relevant for social theory, not just for Durkheimiology, and social theory taken in a very broad way. So I must say, just to end this brief introduction, that when I finally had the chance to meet him and to discuss with him, his view about the sacred and above all about the ritual changed completely my own way to read Durkheim. And I can say that I was a scholar on sociology of morality. I was reading Durkheim due to his sociology of morality. So when discussing with Massimo, we had this research program of bringing together sociology of religion and sociology of morality and build, I don't know, maybe a research program. And the first attempt of doing that was a paper, an unfinished paper that I unfortunately had to finish by myself with the aid of a few colleagues and friends from Massimo that helped me to understand what he meant by those many ideas that he left unfinished. That is a paper published, it was written in English but published in Portuguese. And my comments on Matteo, very interesting thesis, is mainly based on some of those ideas we wrote in that paper. I'm very sorry that we don't have more time and that I'm so far away, because I wish to spend the whole day talking and discussing the various aspects from this exercise made by Matteo that I consider really interesting. I appreciate very much this reading about Durkheim in first considering him as an author who has a relevant contribution to understanding the human being, not just someone understanding society, but what it means to the social being, to the human being. And I'm also very fond of this exercise of recreating the classics, to taking the classics to create new approaches, new theories, etc. But I will do that somehow disagreeing from Matteo, so we can have a chance to discuss a bit further. Okay, it's not. I'm not saying that I don't agree with the whole argument, but I want to make two points where I don't read Durkheim and in the same way. So maybe having different approaches, the whole story can become more interesting. At least for me, I like very much when we have this opportunity to see things from different angles. Okay, I took 2 points. Let's see how I can develop them, because I had not much time to think about that, so I will talk about them maybe in a very superficial way. The first one is this understanding about the homo duplex and the social part of the homo duplex as being something external towards the individual. As Valeria mentioned, I'm doing a formal training to become a psychoanalyst, and I'm studying a lot Lacan, and I'm trying to bring to build a bridge between Durkheim and Lacan. So my reading of Durkheimian theory on the human being is very much influenced by my current reading on Lacan. Of course, Lacan came very, very later regarding to Durkheim, but I see I really believe we can make this approximation. In which sense? In the sense that society is not just an external device that we can put inside the individual as something that you put in a computer. It's not like a software that is completely ready and we can introduce in individuals' mind through education. But when Durkheim refers to the social dimension of the homo duplex, he refers to what comes from outside and is reshaped by every single individual. And in each of us, we have just a small portion of society that is always completely reframed by the very process of socialization. Socialization is not just something that arrives from outside, from upside down, but is also about the way every single individual is affected by society and make those external ideas our ideas. And now bringing Lacan to the conversation. So the most deeply rooted social fact is the language. Lacan refers to the baby, even the unborn child, as already formed by the language and by he or her position in a social system, in a family, in a specific country, linguistic system, etc. So when we are born, okay, we might have more instinct. The instincts are not shaped yet, but we are already called by a name. We have a place in a family. We are daughters or sons. We are designated by a gender. When the baby is still inside the mother, people used to ask, oh, is a boy or is a girl? So the whole world becomes to be created around this unborn child. So when the child is born, society is already there. And now epigenetics is showing us that what a mother eats can have an important role in the genetics. So the society is part of who we are before we are born. So it's not just something that comes from outside through socialization, but even before that. And that is so much part of us that we cannot think, we cannot even feel without being a social being. So I know this is not so different from what Matteo just said, but it's a way to think about the social dimension not just as an external device, but as something that is very much part even of our body. Okay, I'm not sure if you will agree with that, but for me is a way of reading that can bring us a lot of insights. Okay, the second point regards the therapeutic role of this ascetic sociological exercise, if we can call it this way. From one side, I agree that in Durkheim there is this idea that we need to salvare l'individuo da se stesso, saving one from him or herself, from our passion for the infinite, etc. But if we go back to the book Suicide, we cannot forget that suicide can be caused not just because the lack of regulation or the lack of integration connected to anomic and egoistic or selfish suicide, but we also have the altruistic and the fatalist kinds of suicide. In this paper that I wrote with Massimo, we called it the hypobaric or hyperbaric suffering, diseases, malaises, I don't know the term, that meaning that we can suffer from the lack of integration, the lack of society, the lack of the limit. If the pressure is, the external pressure is not enough, we can suffer. But on the contrary, if we have too much pressure, too much society, we can also suffer. So Durkheimian solution is not just about integration, but a very quality of integration. How we can belong without disappearing. And of course, that was not just Durkheimian concern, but also Massimo's concern. We no longer live in traditional society, but traditional ways of existing are still there. So how we can put all this together and how we can learn from tradition, but also understand that too much tradition can be the cause of suffering. So that that was the question Durkheim began the division of labor with. How we can explain that the more the society becomes interlinked by the division of labor, the more we become interdependent, the more the individual can become free. But free does not mean not having bonds. Free does not mean doesn't belonging. So the whole challenge is to understand how we can encourage collective rituals and not making ourselves to disappear or giving up something that was very important to Durkheim, that is, how it is in English, spirito di autonomia, the autonomy spirit, that means for him rationality, that is the ability to think with our own mind and not be crushed by institutions. So maybe together with moral education and suicide, we could also add leçons de sociologie. I don't know how it was translated into English. Lections of sociology lectures. I'm not sure. That is that book on the physique des mœurs, and the book on morality that was later discovered by this Turkish scholar Bortolini. That is a very precious book or writing on how to find the proper balance between institutions in order to allow the individual to flourish. So if we are meant to think about a Durkheimian therapy or something like that, we need also to look to that other side, how to prevent the individual to be too much digged or grasped by the sociological logic, the social logic. I'm not sure if I completely agree with the solution Durkheim offers in that book, and somehow in Division of Labor, the problem is also there, that the individual might rise by the balance from what he called the state, this very impersonal being, the state, and the intermediary groups. But it's a very interesting way to put things, because the intermediary groups, for instance, religion can be considered an intermediary group, a political party, a union, labor union, anything you want. It brings this dimension of belonging, of integration, of even of regulation, but you need the state, a liberal state, to prevent the group to completely take the individual, to allow the space for freedom. And how that is possible? By establishing that a large diversity of groups can exist. So if you can belong to a diversity of groups, maybe this can help you to not be completely submerged by on the influence of the group. So somehow the state plays a very significant role in contemporary society. Let me see what else I thought I should mention. Yeah. So I guess this is the basic two ideas I want to bring into discussion, so we can have actually time to discuss. But once again, I was very inspired by these suggestions you made, Matteo. I think there is a beautiful project of reading Durkheim in this sense. And I'm really looking forward to see the next results of this new book that you are planning. I guess I will stop for now, so we can have more time to discuss. Okay.